Now I'm delighted to welcome today's speaker, Ruth Schieferstein. Ruth studied history and museum studies at the University of Aberdeen before joining Historic Environment Scotland in 2015. She has a passionate interest in digital preservation, history and heritage, and in November 2018 she joined our digital projects team as an archives officer. So Ruth, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Hi, everyone, and welcome to joining me today. This talk is about our 4-year project, HES Archives Digital Projects, and also about digital preservation at HES in general. The beautiful Charlestown Limekilns will be the backdrop for the talk and will act as a case study to showcase the steps we're taking in making digital material available to the public. Before I start my talk, I would like to highlight and explain some words that I will use quite frequently throughout my talk. Some of you may already be familiar with these phrases, but some might not be, so please bear with me while I go through those. First of all, there is digital preservation itself. In its simplest form, digital preservation describes the series of managed activities that are necessary to ensure continued access to digital material for as long as necessary. Then there is accession, which is a new item or collection of items from the same source accepted into the HES archives collections. Then born digital is a material that has been created in digital format, as opposed to created using paper or other analog formats and converted to digital. Appraisal is the process of distinguishing records of continuing value from those of no further value so that the latter may be eliminated. So basically making sure that only relevant records are being kept. Then ingest is the process of putting data into digital archive storage. And finally, metadata is a set of information or data that gives information about another set of data. So I hope that this brief glossary is helpful throughout the talk, and we're now ready to start. So first off, I want to introduce our archives. HES Archives brings together items held previously by Historic Scotland and the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Scotland prior to the creation of Historic Environment Scotland. Overall, we collect, care for and make available material relating to Scotland's archaeology, buildings, industrial and maritime heritage. We also continue to record all aspects of Scotland's historic environment through our own survey and recording work, as well as from a wide range of other organisations, communities and individuals who are helping to enhance our national resource. As you know, digital material is becoming more and more common, not just in our everyday life, but also in the archive. The tangible forms of paper and vellum traditionally associated with archives are now increasingly accompanied by digital surrogates created through digitization, and digital is becoming the de facto format for contemporary records as well. At the start of 2017, we had around 1.4 million catalogue items, of which 530,000 were digital records. All of these digital records are available from our CanMore website, which where you can see the link on the slide as well. However, having only 530,000 digital records meant that the majority of our collections were only available to those able to visit us in our search room in Edinburgh itself. In 2017, through investment funding, we started a pilot approach to mass digitize collections to significantly increase online accessibility. That pilot year added a further 175,000 digital images, which were made available online for public consultation. Among those collections were the area photography and buildings of the Scottish countryside collections, which I've used here as an example on the slides. The success of the pilot year led to the continuation of investment, and the digital projects were established to carry on this work until 2021. So the digital projects had 4 aims. Increase in volume of digital material catalogued and discoverable by users, increase the volume of physical material digitized, catalogued, and available online, improve management and long-term preservation of greater proportion of Head's archives, and the reduction in inaccessible and invisible archives. To meet these aims, the project had two key remits: the cataloguing of at-risk born digital archives and process these through all stages of the digital preservation life cycle to ensure long-term preservation and access. And the second aim is the digitization of archival collection and historic photography, which are currently only accessible in-house and are uncatalogued and invisible. I was predominantly involved with the first remit of the project and will therefore focus on that for this talk today, so not so much on the digitization side of things. The volume of newborn digital accessions has increased annually since the late 1990s. Despite this, the ability of the digital archive to process all these collections had not been able to keep up, thus creating a backlog of digital accessions. At the beginning of our project, a scoping exercise was undertaken to understand the extent of material we hold in our non-public accession database. Across nearly 500 individual deposits collections, we identified over 300,000 digital files in over 400 file formats ranging from 1997 to 2017. Among these backlogs, I came across the Charleston Project Archive. It was one of 141 digital project archives deposited with us by AOC Archaeology Group in 2017. The whole accession contained more than 15,000 individual files, as well as physical items. And our Charleston project was itself a fairly large project with 655 individual files spread over 14 folders. It caught my eyes because I knew the Charleston Limekilns from personal visits, and I was fascinated to see how much they had changed in a relatively short period of time. The archaeological work had been done in 2015-16, and I have visited the Charleston Limekilns last year. So within the last 5 years, I have changed quite a bit. This first picture here is from the project archive, and you can see what the Limekilns looked like in 2015. Everything is overgrown and the fencing looks quite tired and ready to fall over. The next picture shows the Limekilns 3 years later in 2018, which is after a major cleanup and conservation work that the kilns have been undergone. And this is also what they look like today, so much nicer and cleaner. The conservation work was done by us, Historic Environment Scotland, between 2014 and 18, and it was part of the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative suite of projects that safeguard the Inner Forth's important built heritage. The work, or Inner Forth Landscape Initiative, is IFLI for short. That's what it says on the on the slide there, just to let you know. The work included clearance of encroaching vegetation, which can be clearly seen on those two images, replacing and repairing stonework, and installing new lintels and ironwork to make the structure safe for visitors. This is by far not an extensive list of the works that have been done under the project, and I would highly recommend checking out IFLI's website if you want to find out more about this and then numerous other projects. And you can see their website on the slide here. When I've looked further into the project archives that had been deposited with us, I was delighted to see that AOC Archaeology Group had actually been commissioned by Historic Environment Scotland. The works, which were a measured survey of the exterior and interior, as well as an archaeological evaluation, were meant to provide a basic understanding of the remains and inform said conservation work. So let me quickly here tell you a little bit about the Limekilns and why they are so important. The village and the Limekilns at Charleston were built in the late 1760s and 1770s. The Limekilns consisted of a complex of between 6 to 10 kilns at the time, and were extended in the 1790s to create 14 Limekilns in total, which are still visible today. The village Charleston was named after Charles Bruce, the 5th Earl of Elgin, who was developing lime production on his Broomhill estate and was built for the workers of the complex. The buildings were arranged to form the initial CE, which stand for Charles Elgin, which was his formal title. The planned nature of the lime works was for the time the largest undertaking of its kind in Scotland by the 19th century. Its biggest strength was the sheer volume of lime that was being produced at Charleston. It was far in excess of any other lime kilns in the country, and at its peak, Charleston supplied 30% of the UK's building lime. The largest market for Charleston product was the northeast of Scotland, Stirling and Falkirk, with some also going to the central belt. The lime was used in building and in a range of industrial applications, including glassmaking, tanning, and sugar refining. The greatest use, however, was in agriculture for improving soil. By the 1930s, lime production had greatly reduced at Charleston, which brought about a winding down of the industry for the next 20 years. It was eventually closed down in 1957. And the Charleston Lime Company, who owned the site since 1890, sold off their vehicles and equipment, and some of the buildings were demolished on the site, such as those to the Kiln Head. So the Kiln Head is the top of the kilns. The demolition rubbish of those buildings were then thrown down into the kilns, and the kilns themselves remained abandoned ever since. And by the 1990s, the lime kilns had become dangerous and overgrown. In response to fears that the kilns may be lost to decay, the Royal Commission undertook a detailed hand-drawn floor plan and south elevation of the site, together with a section through one of the kilns in 1993. The plan, you can see the plan here on the slide, and it's available as well on Canmore. Some further limited archaeological investigation were also undertaken in the late 1990s in response to some minor development. The investigation identified some earlier 20th century buildings that had survived in front of the kilns. So before we're going back to our project, let us now have a quick look at the digital preservation life cycle. So what is the life cycle? It is probably best explained on the Digital Preservation Coalition website, or DPC. It says that the life cycle refers to all the stages required to preserve and sustain access to digital content, from creation to ingest, management and administration to access and reuse. Here on screen is a simplified diagram of all the stages our digital files need to go through to protect, preserve, and to access them. It all starts with the producer, who creates the content. In our case, this is the AOC Archaeology Group. That material is then passed to us within an accession. Before the material gets ingested into our digital repository, though, it needs to be appraised so that only suitable material gets included in our archive. This is done according to our strict appraisal guidelines set out in our digital repository management policies. For our lime kilns, this meant that I had to go through every individual file to make sure that none were corrupt or obsolete, and that they were suitable for inclusion in the archives. For example, this meant taking out any duplications. This gave me a chance to see what the project archive contains. The majority were digital images and vector graphics, all showing the lime kilns in great detail, and it is amazing what can be seen and discovered while going through a project archive like that. So let's have a look. This image, for example, is a shot down the kiln head. So remember that it's at the top of the kiln. And this is where the limestones and the coal would have been dropped in before the kilns would have been lit on fire to produce the quicklime. It's quite clear how huge this whole undertaking was, like the size and the scale of the operation. Because the kilns would have taken quite large quantities of limestones and coal. Then the next images show the drawhole from kiln number 11, and it was one of the few drawholes that still had its door attached. So this is where the workers would have tended to the fire in the kilns, and this is also where they would have withdrawn the quicklime from from the kilns as well. And I was quite fascinated to see how small those doors actually are in comparison to that big massive hole where they're throwing in all this, all the limestones, and then they're just getting it all out on this small little door. And on the second image as well, you can see quite well some of the debris that the demolished buildings have left behind. So this is one of the examples of a vector graphic that was included in the project archive, and it was recreated for the report illustration and depicts the south elevation. It shows clearly the vegetation and wall cavities and different building materials like bricks and timber on it as well. So once every file had been reviewed and the appraisal process complete, I started to create catalogue records for the material, mirroring overall the file structure provided by the archaeologist, thus maintaining the integrity of the way the material is displayed afterwards. So at this point, the files were ready to be ingested into our secure digital repository, together with all accompanying metadata and cataloging information. Throughout the project, we worked to improve the standards in the archival description of Born Digital collection. We established an archival description standard for cataloging digital material, which standardized captioning and metadata across archive staff working with digital collections, improving retrieval and searchability. So now, after our ingest, we are in the big blue circle, which represents our secure digital repository. Multiple copies are regularly made of the entire digital repository, and each copy is kept at a separate location. We use checksums to control these copies. Checksums are like electronic fingerprints that uniquely identify a digital record. These checksums are generated prior to transfer into our non-public accession database. So basically directly at the beginning again, at the point when the producer is giving us the material. To ensure data integrity, an automated fixity script is run every night to validate each object against the stored checksum to verify checksum permissions and record counts. This means that if a file changes in any way, the checksum will also change, alerting the system that the file may be corrupt. This is why it is necessary to keep multiple copies within the repository so that any faulty files can be replaced with a non-corrupted one. Simultaneously of creating an archival digital record, the system also creates a dissemination copy of the file, which is the rendered image you can see on Canmore. And this is what the consumer or the user would then access and use. So at this stage, files are searchable and discoverable on Canmore. And here you can see the catalog entry for our project archive and what it looks like on Canmore. From here, you can delve deeper into the archive itself and have a look at all the fascinating items and the project in its entirety as well. So overall, to date, we have processed over 80,000 individual files from the backlog, and over 50,000 files have been ingested into the digital archive and are now available for public view. Additionally, the digitization side of the project created another 534,314 new digital items. Overall, this means the digital archive now contains over 1.1 million digital files. That has doubled the size of the archive in the last 4 years. So what is next for us? Although the digital project in its current format ends tomorrow, we have been able to retain some resource to continue this work into the future, further increasing the volume of digital material available online and supporting our commitment to making heritage accessible for all. So finally, I would like to invite you to head over to Canmore after this event to see our showcase beyond the physical and to explore some of our newly available collections through that. Thank you for listening today, and I think we have some time now for questions, but please feel free to also send me an email if we can't address your question today. Thank you. That's me.